Hi,
Um,
Michelle.
I'm
Hello.
going to call this meeting to order. It's 6:01 p.m. Teresa has very generously offered to take minutes this evening. So with that in mind, we are going to move forward on our agenda, and I'm going to turn this meeting over to Kelly and Kim.
One quick question. I can't see who else is at the meeting.
Sure, I have Kelly and Kim. I have Dr. Casimiro. I have Michelle. I have Louisa and Gladys. And you can make a note if you'd like about Ken being on the call as well to monitor our technology needs.
So
Thank you, Ken.
Is Michelle on?
Yes,
Michelle is on.
I am.
How come I don't see it, Ken?
Can you see me?
Oh, there I go. There I see you now.
Mhm.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Oh, this has been challenging.
Can everyone see the agenda?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you.
So we're continuing on our work this evening with the series 4,000 series policies. And so we have several to go over to make updates from our existing policies to new or recommended policies from CABE. So the first one is a job sharing policy. And you will note that the current policy versus the CABE recommended policy, there are no changes. There is one technical edit that we do need to discuss. And that is there's the number 3 spelled out in words, and then in parentheses next to it is 4. So we need to make a clarification error on our correction on that.
Kelly, can I actually just ask a
Yes.
foundational question? I don't think you need this policy at all. And so the reason why I say that is there are many situations where we may find ourselves, particularly in the last 5 or 7 years, needing a 0.2 or a 0.4 or something like that. And we had one holdover of a true job share from many, many years ago that was nothing but a problem. It was who's going to get the insurance and how are we going to share responsibilities. And so I think I would advocate for you actually that you delete this policy entirely. You do have an opportunity to have fractional employment. It just makes it much easier from an HR perspective, much, much easier to manage your workforce if we don't have all of these rules about finding 2 people to share a job. And I think it also gives the added bonus to us of being able to say, we're not in a position to manage a job share. And so I would advocate actually deleting the policy, your call entirely. But I think, to the extent that we can provide some fractional shares, that's really a better way to go for us in terms of efficiencies.
Kim, has this ever come up in negotiation conversations?
Um, the job share piece, I don't remember it really ever. I'm trying to think back actually, Kate, as I'm going over time. The only place where we have a job share and it's not structured as a job share is with Erin, because she's the president of the union. So she actually only works half time, but we had to negotiate a 0.55 because the person with more than 0.55 gets the benefits. The person with less doesn't get benefits. Very difficult to fill that half of the position. And so I think that's the only situation. I just remember, as I said, the one, I think Kelly helped me, it's like an art teacher. I think there were 2 art teachers a
Yes.
long time ago. One's at ACE or at Reach Endeavor. It just created a lot of logistical problems for us because we couldn't reduce the time, we couldn't make any changes to it, and there were a lot of hoops to jump through to make it happen. So I think if someone approaches us, what happens in point of fact is it would have been somebody who says, I don't want to work full time. And so I found this friend that will share the job with me. In point of fact, if we have a very, an employee that we need and it happens a lot in special ed, if they don't want to work full time, a lot of times we'll adjust their schedule down 0.8, 0.6, whatever, so that we meet their needs, but we also meet, ours as well. So I just think this creates a lot more. It's kind of an old hangover from a long, long time ago, this policy.
And you will see in the details, it was adopted originally in 2008. And this is not a policy that is required to have by the board from CABE. This is something that was an opt-in and really customized to Danbury. So there is nothing, it would not harm us to go with Kim's recommendation and remove it in its entirety. And as Kim has stated, to hire in people if we needed. For example, right now, we have an SLP, I'll give you, for instance, that is available to work 3 days a week, and her job is listed as a 0.6. And we give her an assignment that is equivalent to that 3 days of work. We've also done it in the OT and PT area. Oftentimes, we will need some additional service, but not enough to warrant a full-time
full,
employee.
yeah.
And we'll do, so right now we have a 0.4, I believe it is, in the occupational therapy. That's an addition.
Okay. Thank you guys for the explanation. I certainly appreciate it. Committee members, what's your pleasure here? Terry?
It's okay with me.
Okay. Michelle?
I think it sounds all right. I obviously you've thought about how we're going to structure the Career Academy and all those very interesting contracts or partnerships, whatever word we want to use. So I'm assuming that that would kind of fall under. I don't know if this job sharing, you're saying it was kind of like I've got a friend. It wasn't a cost savings like where we weren't going to. So for me, I'm fine if, it's kind of outdated.
I'm in agreement there. Any other board members on the call wish to weigh in on this?
No, I'm good with it.
I'm good with the two. I think Kim makes a good rationale. Makes sense to leave it out. Why put it in? We don't need it.
All right. So, do we need a motion then to remove this from our existing policy?
Yeah, I think Kelly, talk me through with me. I think what I do is as you vote to make changes to present to the board, this would be one to be, the recommendation would be to vote to remove it from the list.
Correct. And it would be very similar to when we removed the mask policy. We've done that. I was the most recent one I can think of removing. So it'd be a separate one where we'd list this policy specifically and the removal. There may be some questions around the why behind it, which Kim or I could answer to the entire.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion then from one of our committee members here that we
Motion.
recommend to the full board the removal of policy 411 3.4 job sharing.
I move.
Thank you, Michelle. May I have a second, please? Thank you, Terry. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion so carries. Thank you. All right, Kelly, all yours.
We'll move on. Kim and I will probably tag team on this one. So the next policy is 4118.2, professional responsibilities. And it is renumbered 4118.22, code of ethics. Essentially, it is the same essence of a policy, but is spelled out in the CABE recommended version for those of you that compared in much more greater detail. Kind of the first paragraph of the policy is talking about our certified staff and their professional responsibilities, particularly following the Connecticut Code of Professional Responsibilities for Teachers and the Code of Ethics. And then what it does later in the policy is actually quotes the Connecticut Code of Professional Responsibilities for Teachers, so that there's a reference in the appendix right there. And that is right where it's titled Connecticut Code of Professional Responsibilities. And this is directly from the state on what the expectations are for anyone that holds state certification at the certified teacher ranks. And then I want to say it's the fourth page in, there's the code of ethics of the education profession. And then it includes those as well. And there are 4 guiding principles underneath that spell out essentially what holding teachers to high standards of professional ethics and responsibility in their job. Where this comes into play would be is if someone did not, it lays out to let teachers know, first of all, you have to abide by the Connecticut Code of Professional Responsibilities to obtain a teaching certificate in the state of Connecticut. But it also outlines our expectations, both for you at work and in the broader context of the community, that what we expect day in and day out of our teachers. So I think this one is very explicit to state guidelines and other policies and just lays it out there. The other thing it does in the Code of Ethics in that first paragraph for you is it talks about there are other code of ethics for particular professions. So for example, there are organizations for school counselors, school social workers, speech and language pathologists, and this makes a reference to, we expect you to follow the Connecticut Code as well as whatever your professional organization is. So it's kind of a broader bucket as we have numerous different people that are considered in the certified ranks. I don't know if there's any specific questions about, or Kim, if there was anything additional that you wanted to add.
I just have one question for you, Kelly. I think that this 4118.22 appendix, so where all the content is, if you look at the end, it says regulation approved. Is it the intention for those things to all be contained in regulations and not in the policy? This policy is just the top half of the first page.
That is correct. The policy is considered all the way up until where it says policy adopted and there's no
Yeah.
date. And then everything else would be regulations. The reason is we've typically went through and just done the policies. Thank you, Kim, for pointing that out. These regulations are adopted directly from the state Code of Ethics. So that's why they're packaged in here from CABE.
So when we number it, this should actually be 4118.22R, I think, right? Okay. All right. So my only thinking, and you guys know, those of you that have worked with me for a long time know that I always say, put a lot of the content into the regulations and not into the body of the policy. So shorter is better for the policy because that's the part that needs to go through board approval. The regulations are sort of, you can change them at any point, but we don't need board approval to do that. The reason why I like these is because why I like the preamble and all the contents in the appendix is that sometimes, particularly when we're talking about employee conduct, sometimes you can't quite get your finger on why conduct or misconduct may be an issue. It doesn't violate a clear rule, but it's, either unprofessional behavior or the way in which you interact with a child is hard to get your hands around sometimes. And so what I like about the rules of professional conduct are that they kind of give us some more bumpers, like some more guardrails on what kind of conduct we can point to a teacher and say, see, here in this code of professional responsibility, here's where it's embodied a concern we have about the tone you might use with a coworker or the manner in which you conduct yourselves when you apply for another position. So it just gives us another place to kind of put guardrails and explain a little more where, some of them are things that you feel like you shouldn't really have to say them out loud. This is kind of where they get embodied, and that's why I like them. The other thing I like about the rules of professional conduct is we will sometimes use those as a way to kind of shore up or make more muscular interviews particularly with administrators, but also with teachers. Gives us another place to kind of hear about people's values, the way that they see their mission as teachers. And so it gives us another place where someone has really thought in some detail about what these general guidelines of
You're
living
cutting out?
look like. Sorry,
Not on my end.
what's that?
I think Teresa was just having a little trouble. She said the audio was cutting out. Teresa, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. It's
Okay.
been funky.
Back and forth a little.
That's really my thinking about the many pages that you have here and why they could be useful and that they won't need to be changed by vote because they're regulations.
Thank you, Kim. Teresa, I just want to make a note here that Juanita is in the meeting now as well.
Thank
You
you.
could add her to the attendance. Thank you.
I will.
So after that feedback from Kelly and Kim, committee members, do you have any any thoughts on this or anything you want to share about it? I mean, to me, it seems pretty straightforward. This is, state of Connecticut content, so it's pretty universal.
The first is state, and then actually the latter is this CEA organization. So yes, it's
sorry.
too big, which makes sense. And as Kim said, because it's a regulation, if the state made a change to the Code of Professional Responsibilities, we would be able to just notify the board and make that appropriate update. But I do think it's helpful to have it in reference there for teachers, administrators, conversations with staff about expectations.
Okay. So I don't see any hands raised here. Any committee members have any feedback on this particular policy and the regulations that go along with it? All right. Seeing none, then I will ask for a motion for recommendation for the full board of this policy, please.
Oh. Oh, it's live. I motion.
Thank you, Michelle. May I have a second, please?
Second,
Thank you, Terry. So, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. That is going to bring revised trade policy 4118.22 Code of Ethics and the corresponding regulations to the board for first read. All right, moving right on.
Okay. The next one is, I'm going to note there's a little bit of a difference. There'll be two policies that we'll look at. Their numbering and alignment was misdone when renumbered by CABE. So the first one we're going to talk about is 4118.23, which is conduct. And then the second one is 4118.232, which refers to alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. And this, again, is kind of following up on the professional responsibilities. There are two additional policies that outline further expectation for our certified and non-certified staff in the instance of this first policy. So 4118.23 conduct refers to, and this is an additional policy. We only had one previously on the drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. There were two different policies in reference to that. We only need one. This is talking about conduct of the employee, particular to coming to work appropriately dressed, on time, prepared, that personal life conduct is the business of the board if and when it interferes with their performance in the school setting, and then outlines, should there need to be any disciplinary action taken on the conduct of either a certified or non-certified employee, that it would be in accordance with applicable laws, policies, and their collective bargaining agreement. So this outlines not just professional or certified staff members, but also non-certified staff members.
Any questions on this policy from committee members? Okay. Any questions from non-committee members?
Wait. Kate,
Oh, sorry, Terry, I didn't see your hand there. Go ahead.
sorry. So we're going to delete 4218.231 and just have the 4118.23.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
This would be replacing that policy. That is correct. Kim, was there anything additional in reference to this conduct policy that you wanted to add?
Nope. No, I'm just struggling with the numbers and I'm trying to understand what happened. But I think it doesn't matter if you substitute this conduct one for the smoking and use of tobacco, because what's the content of the smoking and use of tobacco is in the next one, the drug and alcohol free workplace. So it doesn't matter. We're just basically taking the number, right? The number designation.
That is correct. There was, my understanding from when I spoke to CABE about this is that there was originally two policies, because the old 4118, it was 0.231, was another smoking and use of tobacco on school premises, and they've now changed that to the conduct one. It's a little bit confusing, but we're recommending this policy number to update the previous 0.231 policy. Any additional questions on this one?
All right, I'll look for a motion to make a recommendation to the board for full reading on policy 4118.23.
Is it just?
Michelle, was that a motion?
Yeah, I'll move.
Thank you. May I have a second, please? Thank you, Teresa. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion so carries. Thank you.
The next one is the alcohol, drugs, and tobacco policy. So it is, 4118.232, and it applies to both certified and non-certified. And really what you'll see here in this policy is it's a drug and alcohol-free workplace. And the primary difference between our original policy, which is from 2023 to this one, is that this policy from CABE spells out definitions of different drug or alcohol related products. So they'll define cannabis, for example, and so forth. So there's a lot of really information in here so that what we mean by drugs and alcohol in the workplace is very clearly defined. You'll notice in the first, then the second section of this refers specifically to the use of prescription drugs, which is an addition compared to the previous policy we have. And then smoking, disciplinary action, and then finally employee assistance related if there would be a concern with any of these. So this is a much more robust, and I think due to some of the recent changes in law, policy, and procedure, CABE has updated. This is a very recently updated policy. So I don't know if there's particular questions about the content. It is one of the lengthier ones we'll be reviewing tonight. I guess I'll start there.
Any questions from committee members here? Go ahead.
Real quick. So you
Michelle?
said you added the prescription to this policy? That was my, yeah, because I had read through a lot of it. So are we going to go over that in more detail, right?
We certainly can if there's particular questions, yes.
So can you just really clearly, again, and maybe I missed it, what it is that was added exactly? Like, in other words, if, I don't know, I'm kind of wondering if somebody is going through a period, like maybe an illness, and they're taking medication. So, and it's, so how does that work? Like, let's say they're going through chemo, they've been given something. So I'm just kind of wondering how that policy works. If, even if it's not somebody that might be on a certain medication all the time, but, I'm a little kind of unclear on how that would impact somebody's life if they're working there.
So it's pretty detailed, Michelle. It goes through not only defining what kinds of substances you can take in the workplace, it also talks about not coming under the influence so as to be impaired to affect your ability to do your job. But it also has some pretty rigorous notice requirements in it. So you need to come forward and notify us if you're taking a prescription drug or anything like that for palliative reasons, and it lays out kind of what you have to do. The thing about it that is a little bit challenging for us, I think, will be there's a lot of we have to distribute the policy, we have to make sure everybody receives it in hand, we have to provide an EAP option. We do all of that anyway. I always get nervous with these restrictions, and the only thing I'm kind of sitting here thinking about is I'm wondering if some of them should be regulations rather than part of the actual policy. But I think that listen, we have had a lot of instances, particularly in the last year since the use of cannabis in Connecticut has become legal, of having to cope with employees who come to work obviously impaired. And we handle it very much like we do people who come alcohol impaired. So it's just a little bit harder to determine. Testing is not super accurate because it stays in your system a long time. So we've had that issue and we've dealt with it very much like we do with alcohol. We've also had it where people have come and said, I need this for medical reasons. And those people always provide to us a doctor's note, or they have a medical marijuana card that they also were producing at the time. So we've done a lot of those as a matter of course. And this policy really just puts it in writing and puts on us an obligation to hand it to all of our staff and post it, and also an obligation on them to alert us, because nobody ever alerts us unless we come to them and say, it seems like something's up, what's going on here? And it tends to run through, somebody who handles leaves on my end to have a confidential conversation. But so this really just kind of lays out the roadmap in a way that we've never done. We do it in practice, but it has never been written quite this way before.
Oh, okay. So you'll stipulate there, like in the regulations, I'm assuming, like you have to provide it now instead of it just being assumed or whatever the case is.
Correct.
I was just looking at like when you start, like let's say somebody,
Yeah.
unfortunately is diagnosed with cancer and,
Yeah.
at night, whatever it is, I don't know, but that's why I was kind of just wondering how
Yep.
would it,
Yeah,
so,
I think it's the same. It's just like you would, we're concerned about coming to work impaired. That's what we worry about. So that's really, that's always been kind of our inquiry. But like we had somebody, Kelly and I had somebody, it was maybe in the last year, who came to work and her clothing absolutely reeked of pot smoke. So much so that it was causing kind of conflict in the workplace. So we have
wow.
to do, yeah. So we have to, and that was somebody we went back and said, is there is this recreational? Is there a reason why?
Mhm,
But all the same kind of inquiry like you would around someone with a disability or a serious health condition that's treating. So we do that kind of through the Americans with Disabilities Act and FMLA. We'll look at it that way. But this kind of fleshes it out. And I don't think that's a bad thing because it really does give an employee a place to go and look and read it all. Whereas now they don't really have that. We're applying the law to this situation, but there's not a place where you could go and look at it.
Okay, no, because I know like there's epileptic, some epileptic children are
Yep.
treated that way. So that's why I was kind of like wondering if we're implementing this, how does that affect,
Yeah.
those specific conditions? Obviously, if you're,
And
And
then
it goes on to say that it has to be prescribed by a treating physician. So if there is
Okay,
something
good.
that is for, it is very specific under that prescription drug that if you are, following in compliance with doctor's orders, that there is a level of protection there. Of course, we don't want someone that's,
course.
impaired in the workplace. But it really highlights, it has to be prescribed. It cannot be on you for other purposes. And that, you cannot utilize marijuana on school property. Really from the CABE update on this policy, you're going to see, a big focus on marijuana and a big focus in this policy on spelling out specifics around vapes or e-cigarettes, because that is stuff that we are dealing with. And for those of you, Kim has given a couple of employment related examples. Similarly with our students, some of you that have participated in expulsion hearings have seen that those two factors have definitely upticked recently. And so I do think it's important that we have something that outlines kind of more current with what is going on in the world around us, so that we can point to a place, as Kim said, usually I go with the less is more in a policy, but you can point in this policy to very specific things and say, no, actually vapes and e-cigarettes right here are not permitted and this is why.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Are we now using the term cannabis instead of marijuana? Like those are two, like not to reveal my age, but it was against the law when I grew up. But are we using the term cannabis instead of marijuana? Like they're not, I only see cannabis.
Policy says cannabis.
And
Yeah.
it refers to
that's like
cannabis and medical
marijuana.
marijuana.
Yeah.
I think when they talk about medical use, they tend to use cannabis instead of marijuana.
Okay.
All right.
But it goes on to define cannabis to say it means marijuana, which includes, and then, so I think we're covered either way, Kim.
Oh, yeah. And then it says the definition of marijuana also includes any product made using hemp. I can't. Okie dokie. We'll follow the policy when we need to.
The only thing I want to call everyone's attention to is on the last page of this policy, right before the legal references. There is an optional section, and this is for the CBD products. And it says employees are prohibited from possessing or using any products with CBD, whether derived from hemp or cannabis, regardless of the amount of THC in the product or to the extent to which it is legal or illegal under state law. That is not something we're required to put in there, but that is an option to include if we so choose.
There's a specification earlier in the somewhere I was reading through that talks about the specific percentage.
Yeah, it's right under cannabis, Kate. It's 0.3% total
Right.
THC concentration.
And it specifies CBD in that definition as well, which is kind of interesting because obviously it's a component of that plant, but it's not a psychoactive component. So I know that folks will use that sometimes for pain or for even migraine treatment, things like that. So, I don't know that I necessarily have an opinion on it, but I feel like because the amount of the psychoactive substance is, specified there, that there may not necessarily be any benefit to restricting usage of CBD. But I think in terms of possession, I don't think you would want employees coming to work with something like that, because I don't think you would want the risk of any student laying their hands on any of that material.
I also wonder too, Kate, when listening to you say that, I'm wondering whether some of it isn't also this, like, you're setting an example piece. Do you know, I mean, some of these policies that CABE sends us are part of the, you are the role model in the building. And so I'm wondering if part of it's that, because you're right, that's never going to hit the definition of impaired. We're never going to say someone's impaired because they're using a CBD product. So I wonder if there's some other, to be thinking about some other rationale.
Yeah.
The other thought that I had, Kate, while you were talking, is if we wanted, we would have the option to tweak the wording. If we wanted to, we could choose to eliminate the CBD add-on, so to speak, because it is outlined earlier in the policy, I think with very specific details, but we could also put just that they're not permissible in the workplace. So because of, God forbid, we would not want a child to get their hands on, a cream, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. So we could tweak the wording of that if we wanted to include that as well. Rather than just saying they're prohibited in the workplace.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Michelle?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, I know that there are, because I'm covered in arthritis, the lotion, right? The CBD, it's like a lotion. So, or, like that, almost like, what do they use? The green stuff, that you put on for,
I use it,
aches,
and it's
for aches.
wonderful. It has
Right,
no
because we've had hip
THC.
replacements and knee replacements, so that would be something that, I don't know if anyone's gonna eat it or drink it, and I can understand why you may not want that on the property. But, that's something like a lotion. If somebody has that in their bag and they haven't put the two together, you know what I mean? For whatever reason, traveling in a car for more than an hour, or, you know what I'm saying? It's something like that where I wouldn't want them to be put in a situation where it's really just a lotion and you're really not meant to ingest or to change or to alter other than literally pain in the body.
If you were to have that on your premises, it's in your bag because you forgot it was there, and a student were to ingest it, I would approach it the same way. I would approach that discipline the same way, whether the policy said it's prohibited or not. Do you know what I'm saying? It would be, you are the employee, you had something that was known of a known danger to other people, and it was in a place accessible to your students or to kids in the workplace. I would approach it as a disciplinary matter, whether you had a policy prohibiting it on site or not. Because
Is
it's
this similar to like an over-the-counter, Kim, like a headache medication or something like that, right? It's
Correct.
not really any different than that.
correct.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
same policy then. Okay, great.
I guess with that said, I'm probably inclined to leave that last section off. I just feel like doesn't serve any purpose to this policy. So
I agree, if you want my opinion.
thank you. Absolutely. All right. Well, if there are are there any other questions from non-committee members about this policy? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to make a recommendation for first read to the full board for policy 4218.232, alcohol, drugs, and tobacco in the workplace. Thank you, Michelle. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion so carries.
Okay, the next policy up is our social networking, and you will see that it is policy 4118.51. And the title of this policy, CAPE, has updated to say rights, responsibilities, and duties, social networking. Essentially, it's the same thing, the same content or essence of the policy. Again, very similar to the drugs and alcohol policy. You will see some significant updates just related to some of the expansions of social networking since the last time that we adopted this policy. Kim, do you want to go over and highlight just some of the new pieces of this one?
Yeah, I mean, the first most obvious change, I think, is just that, you know, the CABE style is a little bit more narrative. I think in this case, this is not a bad thing. I think that part of what kind of got us caught a little bit in the old policy with the numbered sections was that we had to try to shoehorn certain conduct into one of those 7 factors. So now it's kind of more of a holistic inquiry, if you will. And I think that that's appropriate to the explosion of social media, social networking. You know, we've got all these different ways in which we can communicate. So I like it for that reason. And they're just a little bit more detailed. The piece that I think is most important and the piece that really is what we need in it is not only the piece about it can't be harassing or discriminatory in content, but also that, because what happens a lot is people say, that's my private Facebook page. It's out there in the community. It has nothing to do with my workplace. And so we need to make sure that this policy, and it does, maintains a link that if what you're putting out has a connection to the educational process, that's how we can come in to talk with that employee about the inappropriateness of the conduct. So there needs to be a tether, there needs to be a connection. And so in this new policy, it echoes what I think was in our old one as well, that that we encourage everybody to you know, tee up their own sites, but also that if something violates our policies or otherwise affects the educational process, it's conduct that we can come and talk with you about as a matter of discipline.
I did notice one difference from the old policy to this one, Kim, and maybe I missed it somewhere. But I did see a notice there saying that if an employee of the district wanted to have a Facebook group that's centered around a school activity, and use it as a communication tool, that they had to receive permission to establish that kind of group.
Mhm.
I don't know if I saw that spelled out in this new one.
Yeah, I'm just looking through it. That's a good.
It is not in the current one.
Why?
What I would recommend in looking at it, because I think that's a good question, is if you look at our old policy, there's it's really the bottom of the second page, the last line onto the third page, is there's rules concerning district sponsored social media activity. To me, I think that there is some value in maintaining that, possibly as a reg tucked under this policy. So if we wanted to take and it's numbered 1 through 9, under that rules concerning the district sponsored social media, we could tuck that as a regulation under this policy. And then it would give us the ability to make, you know, slight tweaks and updates if things evolve and change in the social media world. But it would still delineate the express permission, which I think is important.
Is it, Kate, was your question about the logo piece? There's that one paragraph that talks about you can't use the logo without consent or trademarks.
I was looking at the same section that Kelly was about district sponsored social media activity. And there's also, you know, content slightly above that, you know, number 10 and number 11 under that, the rules concerning personal social media activity, that specifies that employees can't link a personal social media page,
Right.
you know, or
Website.
you know, include Board of Ed content on a social media site without, you know, written
Yeah.
permission.
Yeah.
I think there's, you know, some merit to, like you said, Kelly, tucking those under a regulation that slides in under, you know, the larger policy that we're looking to adopt,
Mhm.
just so that folks understand sort
Yeah.
of like the explicit rules here.
'Cause I think, you know, part of what we're getting at is, you know, the group of people or you know, maybe it's a group of, I don't know, a group of staff or a group of parents that use the logo that purport to be representing the district and then, for example, publish photos of a child that we don't have permission to publish their photos for. So it presents exposure to you, legal exposure to the district for violation of, for example, FERPA, by a group that purports to represent the district because the site or the page has all the trappings of the district, if that makes sense.
Yes. So are you proposing an additional regulation around this, Kim? Am I hearing that?
I think that, was it the old language that talked about you needed written, I think that's what the written permission gets at. If you're a
Okay.
group and you want to be using the logo and all that to make it look like you are the district, then you really need to have written permission to do that. So for example, it might be you want to do a fundraiser to raise money for more Chromebooks. And so you're going to do it using the logo. That's one that we might say, terrific, we love that idea. Go ahead and do it. Or you're going to do a walkathon. Terrific. We love that idea. We just want to make sure by giving the written permission that triggers for us the obligation to have the conversation with whoever's maintaining that group to make sure that they don't violate FERPA, that they're not, doing something in our name that might be a problem.
Okay. And I think in this initial in this initial policy though, oh, there it is. Okay. So, number 2 under there, which says employees must refrain from mentioning other Board of Education employees or other members of the school community on personal networking. No, I'm reading the wrong one here. The logo
That,
one
we have had that a
looks
lot.
like the logo one looks like it's specific to employees.
Let's see, what did I just see it?
So
It's number 4 there.
the policy,
Unless
Kate,
I'm so sorry.
Right,
sorry,
that's
on
his-
the current policy,
Yes.
in the number 4.
Not under rules concerning personal social media activity.
So
Unless you saw another place where the logos are referenced.
Mm-mm.
no, that I just wanted to make sure I was following along with you, which policy. That's why I asked for clarification.
Yeah. Kim was talking more about, I guess, ancillary organizations, perhaps like a PTO or something of that nature, where they're, making use of the logo, and there may be, some compliance issues with the way that the content is being managed on that page. So, that's sort of an additional piece that it sounds like we might want to consider adding here. I do think it's hard to police that necessarily or enforce it, but I think if we were to ever find ourselves in a position where something was to happen, it would give us some legal grounds to protect ourselves.
Mhm.
So I think we could handle it one of 2 ways. In the current policies, number 4, with what you're talking about, Kate, the logo, we could lift that exact wording
Yeah,
and populate it under, make it number 10, the outline.
And
and then
expand it beyond employees.
Yeah, yes, this policy actually, and that's one of the things with the revamp, it actually specifies certified, non-certified, so it'll apply to both groups. And so so it would be for anyone there. This is an employee policy. There are
Oh,
other
that's right. Yeah, I
places
forgot
which
we're in the
can-
4000 series.
Yeah, so this relates to people that are employed by the Board of Ed. So we can do certified and non-certified, certainly in another policy section, if we wanted to talk about community members and so forth. I would have to look into what policy that would go under, but I'm sure there's a place we could tuck something similarly in.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it, Kelly. I forgot where we were for a moment.
Do we want to add number 4 then, as I would propose number 10?
I think so. Yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
And then my other question would be for the rules concerning district-sponsored social media activity. Do we want to make that entire section a regulation attached to this policy?
Yes, I think so. I'm curious what other committee members might think about that, but basically, I think it sets up some guidelines so that if an employee is using social media to do communications for whatever group or club they might be running, there's some guardrails there to
Mhm.
kind of keep things appropriate.
would agree.
Yeah.
Michelle, did you want to?
I'm just wondering, how many committee members are on this call? Is it just Teresa, myself, and you?
Juanita is also here, and Gladys is an ex officio
Gladys and
member.
Juanita. Isn't
Okay,
it?
because all right, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't just have the three. Okay, thank you.
We could technically run it with the three, as it's a 5-person committee.
Yeah.
And
No,
3 would
yeah.
constitute a majority, so.
No, I
Just
just
wanna
wasn't
clarify that.
sure. I just wanted to make sure that
Oh,
how many
Okay, so
committee members
when
were
you
on.
make a
Thank you.
motion, can you be specific on what is to be added so I could get it right?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I think what we're looking to do is we're looking to recommend to the board for adoption or first read of 4118.51/4218.51 rights, responsibilities, and duties, social networking. And we are looking to add a regulation under that, which pulls from our original policy 4118.51, 4218.51 social networking. The section entitled Rules Concerning District-Sponsored Social Media Activity. Including the section under disciplinary consequences. And adding in from the previous section titled Rules Concerning Personal Social Media Activity. Item number 4.
Wait a minute, wait a minute.
specifies- Sorry. How far did you get, Teresa?
Uh,
If you wanted to keep it, then you got to slow it down.
Yeah, all right, rules concerning,
District-sponsored
yeah, district sponsor activities and,
And-
and
and
descriptive
adding,
consequences?
sorry,
Or
and
describe con-
including the section titled Disciplinary Consequences.
Okay,
And which also adds item number 4 under rules concerning personal social media activity, which specifies appropriate use of Board of Ed logos or any logos associated with individual schools or programs or school teams.
any school or team, is that right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
I think I got it. I'm gonna pass this by you first.
Now, before we move forward with the motion, I just want to make sure that any of our, anyone on the call, any board members on the call at all, if they have any feedback on this particular issue, just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to speak. All right, I don't see anything, so I'm looking for a motion for the policy and the addition of regulations that we
Thank-
just described,
I'm
please.
all set.
Where did everybody go?
Um, I don't know. Did you want to make a motion on that, Teresa?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
For
May I have a
policy and
second?
additions, you're right, for policies and
Policy
additions?
and regulation additions, yes. That long section we just covered. I do need a second on that motion, please.
Hello, where is
I cannot
everybody?
move forward without a second, unfortunately.
Michelle, you there? Juanita?
I'm here. I will motion, second that.
Thank you,
Okay,
Michelle. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I have 2 votes.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Juanita, we can hear you.
Yes, we got you.
I'm sorry, I
Did-
was
did-
unmuted. I was muted.
Not a problem. We just were, we had a motion on the floor and a second on the floor, and we're taking a vote. We just need a third
Right. Yeah,
vote
I
in
heard
favor of this. Okay.
that. Mhm.
So do we have your aye?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Thank you. That's okay. I just want to make sure we're doing this proper. Thank you so much.
Okay, is everybody else on?
Yep, I've got you, Michelle, and Terry from the committee here, so.
Okay,
All right, so the motion so carries at 6:51. Kelly, all yours. Or maybe it's going to Kim, it's substitute teachers.
I will just reference where we're going and then turn this one back over to Kim again. Where the next policy is 4121. This policy is an update to our substitute teacher policy. And it really lays out some more specific details regarding the conditions under which we employ substitute teachers for our district. So Kim, can I turn this one back over to you to just do a brief overview?
So I don't really love either one of these policies, honestly. And I'll tell you why is, the world of, first of all, let me start with, what I do like is the first paragraph of the old policy that we all recognize that there's going to be from time to time a need to fill vacancies with substitutes, and that we're going to do that in the best way that we can with the best qualified candidates. When we decided, along with many of our colleagues, to outsource this process, a lot of these requirements are certainly incumbent on the agency we use to do this, but there are also requirements that have changed pretty quickly over time. So, for example, in the last year, this new draft makes reference to what happens for substitute teachers in excess of 60 days. That used to be 40 days, and that was a recent change. We've had changes twice mid-year in minimum wage in our state, and so we've had to make changes regularly to the rate that we pay. So I think that a lot of the detail that CABE provides in this sample is really, it's going to be obsolete in many respects as soon as you pass it. So I kind of think, again, and the less is more, I think that it's very clear that we need to provide subs, that we need to make a commitment in writing to using substitute teachers and substitute employees where we can. But the details of how we do that, I don't really think are appropriate for the policy. And I think, we could put them in regulations that we can change frequently without board vote. But I think that this that's proposed by CABE is just too detailed, and it's going to change too quickly. So I'm not a huge fan of it. The other thing I'll say is you will always have an obligation to comply with the statute when picking your substitutes, whether you do it or an agency does it. So, for example, the law already requires that they have a bachelor's. The law already requires that if they are teachers who've retired, there are certain restrictions about what we can do to rehire them. The law already requires that they be background checked. So I think putting that detail that's subject to change above and beyond the fact that the law requires it is not necessary, and kind of sets us up for needing to make changes to this policy.
So Kim, do you have a recommendation as to how we might handle this differently?
Yeah, I think what I would recommend for at least for discussion is, the old policy, that first paragraph, the Board of Ed recognizes there will be times when regularly employed staff will be absent from their assigned responsibilities due to illness, personal reasons, or professional assignments. In order to provide for continuity of educational programs with as little loss as to students as possible, the superintendent is authorized to provide substitute teachers and I would say to fill the vacancies caused by absences, which should not be left unfilled, period. And then I would put regulations, you could even put a sentence there that says regulations have been provided for current updates on how those substitutes are selected, how they're provided, the compensation that's paid, and the duration. And then refer to a set of regulations that can embody the current process. For us right now, it would be, we retain an outside agency to do that complies with all the legal obligations. So a small paragraph of a policy with a reference to regulations.
Kim, what I'm hearing you recommend then is really to revise the existing policy and maybe tweak that last sentence that references some form of regulation.
Yep.
Would you recommend, Kim, to start to adopt the K policy as the regs, or we'd need to tweak them slightly for here?
I think we need to tweak them because I think we should put reference to an acknowledgement that we may, use another source to do all of this.
Mhm.
I think this really oversteps in a way that's just going to create rules that we're going to have to amend again.
'Cause the other thing we could do, Kim, is to your point, to say the board is required to follow legal obligations over the following and list them out.
Yeah, they're all listed.
And
Yeah.
just list them and leave it at that. I mean, we could or could not have regs attached. I mean, that would
Yep.
be an option.
Yep, I like that.
Thoughts, committee thoughts.
Can you talk a little bit about when we have like a regulation change, sort of how that process works just a little bit, because I know we have some newer committee members here. I want to make sure that they understand how that
Yeah.
all operates.
So the regulation changes really are just ones that are done administratively when we're changing kind of how we do business. So for example, if the number of days at the regular sub rate were to change from 41 days to 60, as it did here. So in other words, the law used to be on day 41, you could not have the same sub in place, or they would move to a higher rate of pay. Now it's day 60. We would administratively make that change. So superintendent's office or Kelly or I, somebody would make that change to the regulation and put the new regulation in behind the policy. We couldn't touch the policy without board vote. So the magnitude of the rule rests in the policy that you've approved. How we implement it rests in the regulations that we can update more quickly and be just more nimble and responsive to changes like certification changes, minimum wage changes, that kind of thing.
And Kim, in addition, when we make those regulation updates, we would provide notice to the board. So a copy that this regulation attached to the policy has been updated. Here is a copy. And then that would be the time at which you'd have, ask any questions, understand the why behind the change. But no policy changes can be made without this committee and a full board vote.
Right.
Thank you very much. So Kelly, I'm sorry, I to ask you to explain what you were saying again. I kind of caught what you were saying, but I'm not sure I fully did. Could you just describe what your proposal is?
It sounds, we are required to have this policy. So this is not one we can, vote not to have. But I think Kim raises a lot of good points with some of the details and how frequently they will change. So what I had suggested is we could keep the first paragraph of the old policy that starts with the Board of Education recognizes that there will be times when regularly employed staff will be absent from their assignment through the end of that first paragraph. Then add in one line that just speaks to the responsibilities of the board to cover the class, to provide appropriate compensation, notification, and so forth. And then further write out some regulations that takes the details of the CABE recommended policy. And to Kim's point, also the reference to we may use an agency to do this, like Kelly Subs, for example, helps us with some of this process. And we certainly want to include that as part of our current procedures.
Sure.
So I hope
Okay, that sounds.
So really modifying the old policy is what I'm suggesting, rather than go with the newly adopted, the one proposed by Kate. And we have the ability to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's not what's listed here, right?
No, as we were talking, Terry, and listening to Kim's input, we are always showing you the CABE recommended policies as this is something that they're recommending for our consideration. But in talking it through, I think it makes more sense after listening further to Kim's input to just revise the old one.
So we're gonna put a hold on that?
Well, we'll revise, I guess what we'd look for is a motion to revise it, and we can either rewrite it for the next meeting, or we can try to do it tonight, just to say, revise the current policy 4121 to keep the first paragraph with edit, delete the remainder and include statutory references and create regulations that support the policy, I guess is what we're doing.
Would it
What was
be,
the last part? What was the last part?
And then create regulations to support the policy 4121.
Okay.
Okay. I think that suggestion makes a lot of sense. I don't know if committee members have other thoughts on this that they'd like to share. Or anyone who is on the call.
I make a move to modify the old policy as described by Kelly.
Thank you. Can I get a second on that motion to make a recommendation for, and this will go to a first read for the board as well, correct?
Yes. Yep.
May I have a second on that motion, please?
Second.
Thank you, Juanita. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion so carries. All right, back to you.
the last complete update, and then we have a few extra policies to talk about. The next one is policy 4122, and this refers to student teachers and interns. So you will see that we have a very, the original policy is dated October 27th, 1999. So it's been quite a bit of time since we have reviewed or revised the policy. CABE has a much more specific, detailed policy in reference to student teachers that talk about, how they apply, how they're screened, how they're reviewed, how they're recommended. And so we do feel that it is important that we make, that we have a more robust policy related to our student teachers and interns that will be working with our children.
So you support the revised policy that they're providing then?
Yes, that is correct. And this is what we're currently doing. It just is further detailed and outlined.
Spelled out.
in the
Yeah.
policy.
Yeah.
So it's our current
Thank you.
practice, just detailed out in this CABE policy.
Thank you. Any thoughts from committee members here? Teresa?
If it's okay with Kim, and Kelly, it's okay with me.
Anyone else?
I'm okay with that as well, Michelle.
Thank you. All right, any non-committee members want to chime in? All right, I'll look for a motion to make
I'm
a
good with
recommendation.
it.
Oop. Thank you, Louisa. I'll look for a motion to make a recommendation for first read to the full board for policy 4122 for student teachers. May I have a motion, please?
I motion.
Thank you, Terry. May I have a
I
second, please?
motion.
Is there a second for the motion on the floor?
Second.
Thank you, Juanita. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion so carries. Thank you all. All right, so we're moving on here to the review of some more recently adopted policies.
Correct. I am going to talk about these as a group first to start. These were all originally policies when we got back the CABE audit. So I'm referring to the 4 policies under item 2 on the agenda for this evening. They were 4 policies that were lacking, and we immediately moved to add those policies. So they were added, 3 of them in May of 2019 and 1 of them in January of 2023. So we are fully compliant right now there are no recommended changes to any of these policies, but because they were on the CABE audit as originally missing, I wanted to bring to the policy committee's attention that we've done the work related to these policies on those dates. Because 2019 is some time ago, if we wanted to put the policies forward to the board to say that they were reviewed and and accepted again, because we're now looking at basically 5 years since the 2019 policies were adopted. So really the 4 of these policies are put here really to have a discussion around that while we're going through the 4,000 series policies. Did we want to have the board kind of I don't want to say, just say that they were reviewed again at the policy committee level on this date to get a more current date on the policy?
Yes, I think so. Other committee members?
Yeah, I was
Oh.
gonna say, Kelly, I apologize, I did not look at this one before tonight. But there are lots of changes ongoing about gender identification, gender affiliation that are not in this policy. So before you can bring this one back to the board to reaffirm, I think we need to look at it
Has to
again.
be
because
adjusted.
It's happened since 2019. I mean, there's stuff happening even in March. So I'd like to look at this one again and make sure that we've got all of the categories in here and all of the conditions before we bring that back to the board.
Which one was this?
That's
The first one of non-discrimination policy.
There's so many protected classes now. I don't think we have them all in this draft, even though it's from 2019.
Kim, it is, I agree with your comment, but it is the most recent version of the CABE update, but that does not mean that necessarily we can't revise it ourselves. So I think.
Yeah. Yep. I'd like to look at them once more, just to make sure they've got, like I said, I know that the most recent changes in March to 2019, I think may impact this as well.
Why don't, I think what I would propose then is for that first policy, so item A under number 2, that we hold off on doing anything with. But if we wanted to bring forward B, C, and D for updated dates, and certainly if there's any questions on the content of those policies, I'm happy to review them in more detail.
What's the pleasure of the committee here? It sounds like we're looking to put a review by Kim on the first policy mentioned, 4118, but that the other 3, we could make a recommendation to the board to certify or reapprove these.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on that, Teresa?
I make a motion to do so.
Second.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Michelle. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion so carries. So we will bring the B, C, and D to the board just to reapprove those and get an updated date. I think it just makes the most sense to, as we're going through each of these series, to make sure that they're all grouped together again. We don't find ourselves doing this piecemeal again.
I would agree.
So thank you very much, Kelly, for bringing that forward. Appreciate it. That wraps up our agenda here. Did either of you have anything else to add?
Just next steps, we're almost through the 4,000 series. We have a couple more policies to bring forward. Kim and I are in the process of reviewing which are not required, but if there are any there in this particular series, there are a whole host of ones for consideration. So we'll have a couple more policies that we still need to review, one of them being the one we deferred this evening. We can bring back the regulations on the other policy we spoke about this evening so that you can see them. And we'll have a couple remaining policies. I want to say there's 3 or 4 more. And then it would be just for our consideration if we felt there was any that we should add in.
Any questions from committee members or from other board members that are on the call? All right. Well, thank you very much, Kelly and Kim. I appreciate you guys going through all this so efficiently. And we can wrap it up here at 7:10. If we can have a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion.
Motion made by Michelle. May I have a second, please?
Second.
second,
Second by Teresa. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.